Hello there, friendos. MoNaCo
and Milks.
We are in our fifth video, page 1415. We're going to show you how to draw some covalent fluid structures, so physical connections between elements.
A little bit different than ionic.
Yep.
Now we're going to share electrons
Between atoms.
between specifically two
Non-metals.
non-metals.
And there's only
Or three non-metals or four non-metals.
There's only a handful of them, so you're going to get familiar with these really quick.
Yep.
So here we go. There's some rules. Maybe listen to these rules, then go back and write them down, because we're going to practice them and put them into play.
Right.
That's when they're really going to start to make sense.
Right.
So,
When we say the rules, you're right, it might not be perfect, but it'll work.
step one, always count up the electrons you start with from the elements by themselves.
The
Boom.
valence electrons.
The valence electrons,
Yep.
sure.
Then we're going to draw a frame, which is a single bonded, simplest way to start of all my atoms.
You connect the two or three, whatever you've been given, by single bonds, then we'll sort it out later.
That's right. And just a note, central atom is going to be the atom that makes the most bonds.
That's the most unpaired lone electrons.
There you go.
There's only 4 or 5 of them, so whatever. Complete the outer atom's octets by adding lone pairs. You're going to take the extra pool of electrons that you've got after you connect, and you're going to fill them in kind of where they already went in the first place.
Right, but we're going to start with the outside atoms and work our way in.
Good.
Yep. Then we're going to check.
In 2 dimensions.
2 dimensions. We're going to count the number of electrons we use total. Because
You can't create electrons.
if we had 15 to start with,
Got to have 15 at the end.
Right. So if we haven't used them all, we're going to put lone pairs on our central atom to fill its octet.
Because we're checking in 2 dimensions. 1, to see the electrons we started with, and 2, to make sure that all the elements have a full octet.
Right. And we're going to do the octet in the central atom last.
Got it.
There you go. If I've used them all,
and it's still not making out sense,
we'll take care of that on page 15.
with a double or a triple bond.
You got it.
Okay, so simple example. Let's start. We're going to color code these all the way along the way. So the first thing you've got to do is to count the electrons you start with. In this case, I have 6, 7, 8 electrons that I'm starting with. 1, 2, 3, 4, 7 here, 1 here. So total, 8 electrons. So I counted the electrons I started with, right, Mr. Mills?
Step 2.
Step 2, I'm going to put in the frame where I connect the elements involved by the simplest covalent bond.
A single bond.
A single bond. So I'm going to connect hydrogen to fluorine with a single bond.
Now this would be a perfect time to talk about what that dash is that you just put in.
That dash in there represents 2 electrons.
2. Always a pair.
Always a pair.
One coming from
Hydrogen,
and the other coming from.
fluorine.
That together makes a pair.
Bond. Covalent bond. The sharing of them between. So I got my frame in there. The next part that I'm going to do is I'm going to do my lone pairs. Okay? So my lone pairs, I see fluorine had 2, 4, 6 electrons by itself in lone pairs around it. So I'm going to draw those in.
And we didn't put any around hydrogen because
Hydrogen didn't have any to start
it can
with.
only hold with 2.
And it can only hold but 2, so that's all there is to it. The last part, we got to check in 2 dimensions. Check for the 8 electrons for starting electrons, for 8 electrons that we started with. Let's see here. I've got 2 electrons in the bond, and each one of these dots represents it. So there's 4, 6, 8 total. So I have 8 electrons. I have 8 total that I started with. I'm good. Now I have to check for the octets. Now, 8 electrons in the octet. So hydrogen, well, it has 2 electrons. It's happy. And then fluorine, 2, 4, 6, 8 electrons there. It's also happy. So I'm going to undo that coloring there. No, it didn't work. So fluorine has octet. And hydrogen has a duet, if you want to call it there. So we're good to go.
There you go.
Now, we don't need to have the circles around the fluorine to show that's not part of the model. They're showing you where the 8 total electrons packed in around fluorine's octet.
Right. Directly around it.
Directly around it. And hydrogen over here has the duet. And in a way, if you really want to think about
those circles cross,
that's where you got your covalent bond.
There you go.
Which is 2 electrons.
So we're going to maybe try this one without putting those circles around, see how it goes.
Yeah, and we're just going to color code this one.
Same thing though. So step 1 is count
your electrons.
So I have 6 on my oxygen.
1 from each hydrogen.
1 from each hydrogen gives me a total of 8 electrons to play with.
Right.
Step 2
Frame it up.
Frame it up.
I'm going to, oh, which one should be my central atom, Mr. MoNaCo?
The one that forms the most bonds. And hydrogen only does one, it looks like, so oxygen must be in the center.
So I'm going to do oxygen in the center with a single bond to each hydrogen.
Mm-hmm.
Good.
That's the frame.
That is my frame. So
Now we play around with our lone pairs to see if we can get to the total that we started with.
Now I used 2, 4. I want to do 5, 6, 7, 8 to use up my 8 electrons
That you're allowed to play with.
Now let me go ahead and
And
do step 4 and check. So I'm going to count them up. I'm going to say 2, 4, 6, 8. Remember each dash is an 8, or is a 2.
So right next to this check, we had our total. Yep, we had 8 total. Good.
Check.
And then we had our octets.
Around my oxygen, again, I have 2, 4, 6, 8. Oxygen's octet is clear.
So O octet.
So the O octet
is good.
Check. And H's duet, if you will, is also checked.
Filled. Beautiful. Nice. Let's see if I can't do this with some NH3 here. So I'm going to count up my electrons that I'm starting with. Nitrogen's got 5, and I got 3 hydrogens, 1. So again, I'm working with 8 electrons here. Cool. I got 8 electrons to play with. I'm going to frame it up. Nitrogen looks like it's going to form 3 bonds, so I'm going to put that sucker in the middle. Nitrogen's in the middle, connected once to each hydrogen. That's what framing it up is. Then I got to do my lone pairs. Nitrogen came with 2 on that one side, so I'm going to put them in there in the central atom there. Nitrogen's got its lone pairs. Now I need to check for in 2 dimensions. I'm going to have to do, let's see, total electrons. Let's see, we started with 8 electrons. Hopefully we're ending with 8 here. So I got 2, 4, 6, 8 total electrons. That's good. I'm set all there. Now we're going to check for our octets. So nitrogen, if I'm circling this one, I got to keep in mind all the bonds are included. So let's count everything with nitrogen. 2, 4, 6, 8. Nitrogen's got its octet. And now hydrogen's got its duet there, and there. So let's hydrogen duets. And again, you don't need to draw the circles, but where these spheres overlap is where you get your single bonds forming out. So we're good. We're done. This process is working pretty good for us. Yeah, and we're cruising through it this time. So what happens, Mr. Milks, if I'm checking for my octet and things don't work out? Right. Like, oh man, this guy's got like everything and that one's missing something. Let's see.
When I recount and I've used up all my electrons,
So the first check worked.
and the second check, when I verify my octet doesn't work, what we need to do is we need to use one of my lone pairs. We're going to slide it over
And turn
to
it
make
into a double or a triple bond.
correct, and that's going to make it so I don't have to use any more electrons because I can't
Add any more.
Right, I can't use any more than I already have used, and it'll help fill that octet in the middle central atom. Very good. Why don't you do the first one for us?
The non-example, you mean?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So the first thing we do is we count up the electrons that we were given. In this case, we've got 2 electrons to play with. Okay. These are both hydrogen, so remember we're going to do our frame up. Hydrogen connected to hydrogen. Cool. Step 3, we got to do our lone pairs. Well, I only have 2 electrons. There's 2 electrons in that bond right there.
So
There's no lone pairs.
Nope.
There's none drawn in our Lewis dots that we started with, so there's no lone pairs. And then the last part, we're going to do our check. Let's see. Let's start the number check. We had 2 electrons to start with, and we're ending with 2 electrons. And then we have hydrogen. This hydrogen, it's got 2 electrons. That hydrogen, it's got 2 because they're shared. So hydrogen have their duets. We're both happy. That's the covalent bond. That is 2 electrons. Boom! The non-example is not an issue because when I checked, I used all the electrons I was given,
Yep.
and everybody was happy.
You fulfilled its octet rule, even though it's not really 8.
I fulfilled its electron requirements.
All right, well, let's try the next step.
Okay,
Oxygen.
Milks. Count them up, see how many electrons we got to play with.
All right, I see 6 on one oxygen, 6 on another, so that gives me
12
a total
electrons
of
to play with.
12.
So frame it up. Connect them once. O,
Oxygen,
connected to
oxygen.
O.
3.
3. Put in your lone pairs. It looks to me like you're going to fill it up there. 1, 2, 3, 4,
5, 6, 7, 8,
9,
9,
10,
11,
11, 12.
I used up all my electrons, and I counted that
Dash in the middle while I was counting as 2.
So as you just passed your first check. So
I
pass
just
your
passed my
first
first
check and
check.
see how many electrons we.
Whoops, that's supposed to be
Step
4.
4. See how many electrons we started with. How many electrons we finished here.
So let's count them up. I got 2,
2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12. Cool.
So,
So I got
12
the
total
12 check.
electrons. Check. So
Now-
now let's do the octet.
So the first oxygen.
I'm going to switch colors, so we can do just this oxygen. 2, 4, 6,
8.
8.
That happy.
So oxygen number 1,
Just
check.
got a octet check.
Yep.
And oxygen number 2.
And then 2, 4, 6.
Oxygen
Ooh,
2.
do not check.
Octet didn't work out. So what we're telling you to do now is take one of those lone pairs of electrons that's sitting on that oxygen on the left-hand side.
Well, it has more, so it makes sense to use that side.
Yeah, use the one that's it looks lopsided. Let's even it out.
So I'm going to take this lone pair and I'm going to slide it up
Flip
here
it in.
as another pair, bonding pair. So let me redraw what that's going to look like.
So O.
Oxygen with now with
Bing,
a
bing.
double bond to another O. This goes away now because I just used it.
Right.
And so I have 2 lone pairs left on the left oxygen. I have 2
Two.
lone pairs on the right.
Now let's go back through our check here.
Let's check again.
I have
I'm going to check again. So let's count up the electrons. I'm going to start in the middle because each bond is worth 2. So that's 4 electrons. Right? 2 more is 6.
8 on that oxygen. Happy.
10, 12. So my 12 electrons checks. Right? And
Now we check our octets.
now let's check our octets. Let me change colors for that. So now
Did red before.
okay, then I'll do red again. On the left oxygen, I got 2,
2,
4,
4,
and 4 more in the middle is 8.
8. On the right oxygen, you got
2,
4,
4
4
more in the middle is 8. So my octets are now check.
both of them are.
Both of them.
Cool.
So this is what we're looking to see you guys be able to draw. Right?
Looks like a mask, a raccoon. Cool. I'm going to erase a little bit for you so I can do this next one here, Mr. Nooks, just so I have some
Sorry to take up the
space.
space.
It's okay. But notice, we actually had to redraw our picture here. So when our check for the octets and stuff failed, we had to redraw and recheck. That's just part of the process.
There is an element of trial. and
First
error.
part, let's get our
Count.
10 electrons. 10 electrons to play with. Second part,
Frame.
nitrogen connected to another nitrogen once. Third part, lone pairs. Okay, well, I'm going to put the one on each side. The lone pair that I see the nitrogens have already. So I've got 2, 4, 6. I need to put
Keep going, lone pairs.
7, 8, and I'm going to do one over here, 9, 10. Okay? So I have 10 electrons total. I know that's part of my check. So I have 10 electrons total. Let's count them again. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. 10 electrons total. That's our first check. Well, let's check for the octet. So nitrogen 1, the first nitrogen on the left-hand side. Let's do this in a different color. So we have 2, 4, 6.
Only 6. I need 8. What's the rule say if I need 8 and I've used up all my electrons?
I flip in one of these lone pairs and turn it into a double bond. And then you redraw it. So nitrogen now has 2 connections. I put the lone pairs here, and I carry on. So now I'm checking for octets
Let's
again.
recheck.
So I've got 2, 4, 6 for the left-hand nitrogen. Problem, still not there yet. Jeepers. So how do I do it? How do I get that 8 there?
It's looking a little lopsided.
It
Make
does
a
look
little more
lopsided.
even.
Let's take this, let's try and see, go for a triple bond. So let's redraw this again. Nitrogen, 1, 2, 3 connected to nitrogen. Drawing the lone pairs that I got, his and this.
Now let's check for the octets. This is what I'm still trying to get. I have my 10 electrons, I know, but I'm trying to get octets. So I got 2, 4, 6, 8. Because that's, remember, this is 6 electrons shared in between the two. So this nitrogen has 8. Boom, octet check. This nitrogen, 2, 4, 6, 8. Octet check. So what we have here is a scenario where we actually have what we call a triple bond between the two nitrogen atoms.
It took us 2 regions.
All right, take it away, Mr. Milks. We're getting close.
Nope. Step 1, let's count them up. I see oxygen is
12.
6, and 6 is 12. 4 more is 16 total
16
electrons to play with. I'm going to do my frame. I see that carbon is going to make 4 bonds,
Put it in the
so I'm
middle.
going to use carbon as my central atom. Single bonded to each oxygen. So
Now
I've
draw
used
in our lone pairs.
I've used 4 of my 16 electrons.
So I got to put in 12 more.
So
Start
I'm
with
gonna,
the oxygen
so
on
I
the
said
outside.
4, so I'm going to go 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16.
You always put the electrons on the outside atoms.
Outside atoms first.
And now when we check,
I need 16 total electrons,
which
and I
we
just
have,
counted and
we
did
just
it.
counted, we did it. But
So
we
now I need the
need
octet.
3 octets. Your left oxygen, your central carbon, and your right oxygen all
Right, so
have
I
to
need
have
O,
octets.
C, and O for my octets.
On the left-hand side, that
I
oxygen's
have-
got an octet.
I can use my red. It does, because I have 2, 4, 6, 8.
Put a check mark over that O.
I'm going to do the other O quick.
2, 4, 6, 8. Other O's
Check on
good.
this O. Central atom.
2, 4.
2, 4. There's our issue.
Now, Mr. Milks, I encourage you to do 2 steps at once here.
Ooh, man, you are living on the edge, Mr.
I am, but
MoNaCo.
it's the end. Let's see if we can apply it, right?
All right, well, so what I'm going to do is I know I need to fill this here, and when I do that,
It becomes a double bond.
it becomes a double bond. So let me just draw that in real quick.
Mhm.
And look, right around my carbon, I see 3 dashes, which is 6.
6.
And that's not enough.
And furthermore, it looks lopsided.
It'll look lopsided, so let's bring this other one right up in
Boom.
and make my other double bond.
Yep.
And now if I lose those lone pairs,
Nice.
it'll look like that.
Check our octets. Left oxygen.
Right, red, 2, 4, and then this is 4 electrons
So
total.
that's 8.
So there's 8. Left,
Right
right
oxygen,
oxygen,
2,
2, 4,
4,
and 4
6,
more
8.
is 8. So we're good there.
Now let's count
Carbon, 4 bonds around there. Each bond is worth 2. So here's 4, and another
There's
4 is 8
8.
oxygen.
Bingo.
checks.
So, now this was a bit of an intense video, especially with all that scratch paper writing that we were doing there. Practice makes perfect in this scenario.
Yes.
We are chemists, we still make mistakes every now and then, but we don't want you to get that way with these simple molecules. So remember, there's 4 basic steps.
4.
Count your electrons, make your frame, put in your lone pairs, and check your octets.
Yep. Check for total electrons and octets.
2 steps in the last, so 4A and 4B.
Right.
Whatever you want to look at.
They're
Hey,
two nerds.
draw the Lewis dot for an atom. You should know how many bonds each atom will make by looking at the gaps,
Right. How many lone electrons are around each atom?
because all the pairs want to get. And remember, carbon makes 4 bonds. Thanks for hanging out with
We got
us
some
there.
practice to do too.
Lots of practice. I know this video is a bit long, but thanks for hanging in there.
Yep.
I'll see you in class.
See ya.